Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, Ashley.
good morning.
We are here to record our final episode from our Western theme, our Western series.
Yes.
It's going to be a good one, too.
Yes, it is.
But something interesting about this one, this is not our first rodeo, so to speak, because there is a backstory to this. Do you want to tell them what happened to us, Ashley?
Well, this makes me really happy that we work really far in advance.
Yes.
Because I sat down to edit this episode and the next one that we are going to do, and the disc was corrupted, and every other sentence was skipping. Well, first when I imported it, it was only 30 minutes, and I knew we had spoken for at least an hour because we commented on it.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that's odd. And then I started listening, and it was
bad.
It was unsavable. And we had so many good conversations, but we thought when we were redoing it, better to tell you all, well, this is our second go around.
And in almost 200 episodes, this is the
first
very
time.
first time this has happened to us,
Yes.
where we are actually re-recording 2 episodes that we
lost.
Right. So we're a little disappointed about that.
Yeah.
We are, it's a little difficult to think about the time and the investment and the great conversation and all the things that are for naught.
Yeah.
However, coming back into this for a second go around.
Yeah, a week later.
Yes, I do think our conversation might even be a little richer. I know we're bringing a couple of new points to the table. So I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, we're going to make the best of it. And like you said, in almost 200 episodes, we've only had 2 mess up. That's pretty fantastic.
It really is. Well, here you go.
All right.
Our topic today is Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
Super excited about this. You guys know I always like to have a little hook, a little lead to kick things off. Originally, this was a true-false quiz.
Right. And I'm going to get 100% this time.
Ashley knows the answers now. But I do want to walk through these 4 questions again because I chose them specifically for the points they introduce.
Yeah.
They give a little teaser about some of the things that we're going to talk about in the episode.
Yeah.
So let's go through them again.
All right.
Number 1's pretty easy. Killers of the Flower Moon is based on a true story, and that is, of course,
True.
Absolutely. Number 2, true or false? 24 Osage Nation members were murdered in Oklahoma primarily between the years of 1920 to 1925.
And I remember this one because it is a trick question.
It is.
There is way more people. The official record is 24, and it could be hundreds. I'm going to say that.
I believe the speculation I saw was in the hundreds,
Yeah.
but you are absolutely correct. Certain sources would say the number was 24 because of the evidence they had, the documentation they had, but so many more said that it was probably more like 60. And then you had other sources, and I believe David Grann's book that we're going to talk about in a minute was one of these that said it is probably more likely in the hundreds because there were so many cover-ups. There were so many things they could not prove.
Yeah.
Regardless, this window of time was a period when there were these series of horrific murders, and it was so bad that they refer to this as the Reign of Terror.
That's so awful.
Awful. And I'd never heard about it prior to this.
Me either.
Which is crazy. We'll talk more about that too. But first, question number 3. The case covered in Killers of the Flower Moon was the FBI's first case. True or false?
False. Although I do know that I answered sort of true before because they were forming. So it wasn't their first case, but it was one of their first ones.
Yeah, it's a significant case in their history. In fact, at the time this happened, they were not even the FBI.
Yeah.
They were just the Bureau of Investigation. But this case was so sensational and so huge that it ended up being a really big thing for them. This was right after J. Edgar Hoover had come on. And I believe, if I recall correctly, it was their first huge homicide investigation that brought them a lot of publicity and, of course, put them on their path towards what they became. Absolutely. The last true and false question. After the movie premiered, Google searches for Osage increased by 75%. True. And then I saw, this was actually in a Teen Vogue article written by National Archives. It went on to say that the most searched for phrase was, "Is Killers of the Flower Moon true?"
Yeah.
That hit me because we commented on this. They acknowledge that as you start the film, it tells you that this is a nonfiction story, I believe. But I think what this speaks to is the fact that this is a part of our history as Americans.
Believe it happened.
Right. And so few of us knew about it that after this movie came out, people were Googling, is it true? Really? Could this be true? How could I not know about this? I think is the underlying message there. So those were our first 4 questions, kind of kicking this off. We are going to be talking actually not just about the film today, but about the book.
Yes.
Because that's how I came into this story. And I'm so excited to talk about the book. But the approach we're going to use, we're going to focus on the film in the first part, take our break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the book. So you saw the film for the first time.
I did.
Going into this episode, right?
I did.
In preparation for this episode.
I did, yes. I had missed it the first time when it first came out. It was not on my radar. I don't remember what was going on in my life, but I totally missed it. However, this is something I spoke about before, is I was completely gaslit by this film and the character of Leonardo DiCaprio, because Ernest Burkhart, because I thought from the trailer, and I rewatched the trailer, I don't know why I thought this. In the trailer, I thought that he and Mollie fell in love, and that he was going to rescue her out of this. Was I completely wrong. So as this was going on, I was like, wait a minute. When's the part where he wakes up and he takes her out of here? Because again, from the trailer I had seen, and that was just Martin Scorsese. I thought it was going to be violent, and it just was like, I don't know, I might be scared watching this. So that's another reason I'd kind of avoided it. And I thought, oh, just a love story where the husband's going to rescue his wife when he finds out that these murders are occurring. I was so wrong. And it took me 75% of the film before it dawned on me, like, oh, he's just fully bad. He's just
this is not going the way I predicted.
Not going the way I predicted. There is not going to be any waking up of this character. He's just terrible. Okay, trailers really matter. And your interpretation of trailers really matter. So that was my impression.
Story.
It was.
Well, we're going to talk more about our impressions in just a minute, but first, just this tiny background. Killers of the Flower Moon, the film, was released in 2023. It was rated R with a runtime of 3.5 hours.
Yeah, it was
long.
It was
but
long.
I was so engaged, it flew by.
It did for me too.
Yeah. It was so good, I thought. But as you've said, it was directed and you didn't say this part. It was co-written by Martin Scorsese. The New Yorker, an article I saw there, pointed out that this was the first Western for Martin Scorsese, even though he was in his 80s when he did this.
Yeah. And I saw an interview with him where he said, I'm in my 80s. What am I supposed to do? Sit still? That's my paraphrase. Right. He was sort of like, what? Yeah, I'm going to.
Why are you surprised?
Why are you surprised? Yeah, I'm going to do it. But what was I just going to say?
Well, while you're thinking about that, I think it was not so much that people expected him to stop. I think it was more like, you've been a director this long and this is your first Western?
That's what I was going to say.
Right.
When I was watching it, the Western, I know it was a Western, but it's sort of the tail end of a Western because you had cars, you had electricity. And to me, Westerns don't have either one of those. So this was like the transition from out of the Wild West into more modern times. Yeah, more modern time.
Well, that same article actually went on to say that Killers of the Flower Moon is not your typical Western. Right. So that kind of goes along with what you were saying. But here's what they pointed out. Quote, it borrows more from such intimate psychological dramas as Phantom Thread, Suspicion, and yes, Gaslight.
Absolutely.
Than from any of the Western classics of John Ford.
And your audience will also be gaslit if you're me.
Oh, wow. I mean, I loved that connection to Gaslight because
it was true. She was being gaslit. Oh gosh, was she being gaslit?
Absolutely.
Poor Mollie. Oh, yeah. I loved Mollie. I wanted the best for Mollie.
Oh, I mean, how could you not root for her? Well, this movie, very popular on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 93% score from the reviewers with an 84% from the audience. On IMDb, it has 7.6. And this movie received 10 Oscar nominations.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, a journalist named Eric Kane wrote an editorial for Forbes expressing the opinion that Killers of the Flower Moon should have won the Oscar for Best Picture over Oppenheimer. And in that article, which was interesting to read, he gave a little bit of historical context about the film. So I'm going to read this from his article. Based on the book by David Grann, Martin Scorsese's film tackles one of the most troubling conspiracies in the history of the American West. When the Osage tribe finds oil on their land, they become extremely wealthy overnight, the wealthiest people per capita in the entire world. But the government assigns guardians to manage their money, the first of many exploitative acts that would begin to eat away at the Osage people, not just draining them of their newfound wealth, but breaking their spirit along the way.
It's horrible.
Robbery and theft and flagrant murders follow. The film follows Ernest Burkhart, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who returns from World War I to work for his uncle, William Hale, played by Robert De Niro, a wealthy rancher in Oklahoma who makes great public shows of his support for the Osage tribe. Hale encourages Burkhart to marry an Osage woman, Mollie, played by Lily Gladstone, because she has full-blood land rights, making her, and whoever inherits her estate, wildly rich. Ernest is neither particularly smart nor particularly scrupulous, and he is easily manipulated by his uncle, the, quote, king of Osage Hills. That covers it pretty well.
It covers it very, very well. As far as the comparison to Oppenheimer, which one should have won? I can't really weigh in on that because I also haven't seen Oppenheimer.
Okay.
So don't know. But I thought this was a fantastic film, and it's a film that sticks with you and you think about it.
Absolutely.
I am still thinking about this and still watching YouTubes about this. Even though I thought we had a perfectly good episode, after we recorded, I was still looking up stuff on this and wanting to learn more about this. And so that tells me that it was a good film and it was a film that stuck with you.
Well, let's talk about some of our impressions about the film.
Okay.
Which for you was your first watch and for me was a rewatch.
Yes.
You go ahead and start.
Okay. Well, one thing that I thought was very interesting is that this focused on the relationship between Ernest and Mollie and that we took the time to actually see them fall in love. So to me, it was more of a psychological thriller because you're watching this woman truly fall in love with a man who, and we're doing spoilers, correct? That's okay?
Yes, I think it's okay.
That ends up trying to kill her, but also seems to really love her.
Yes.
So I was that's part of why I think I was still conflicted about, oh, he's gonna realize the error of his ways and they're gonna ride off into the sunset together at some point, because surely you understand that you love her, you say you love her, but you also are trying to kill her. Another point is when we're first introduced to Ernest, I think I remember in the Tombstone episode, the first time that we see Kurt Russell's character, Wyatt Earp, he is doing something good. Like the horse is getting hurt and he steps in and he hits the person that's hitting the horse and is like, doesn't feel good, does it? The first time that we see, I'm pretty sure the first time that we see Leo's character, he gets in a fight. He doesn't even know why he's fighting, but he just starts punching. And I thought, doesn't that tell us a lot about who he is? He just follows the crowd. First of all, he follows the crowd. He gets in a fight and it thrills him. He's just excited that he's in this. He's violent. He's excited by violence and he follows the crowd, which is kind of who he becomes. So that was also an interesting way to introduce the character.
Yeah, I will say I like that, what you just shared, because it makes me think the term follower, he was not a man who thought for himself. He absolutely was very easily influenced. I think he did a great job. Leonardo, I think, did a great job acting, because I don't think that's an easy role to play.
No.
Because I did believe he loved Mollie.
I did. But
I also believed that he 100% lived in this space of I have to please my uncle. He's the person that I admire. He's the person who controls everything. I feel like I saw him as this man who loved his wife but also loved money, and somehow was able to justify or not even allow himself to realize fully what he was doing.
I'm not sure he had a conscience. Right. I struggle with that. Did he have a conscience? Because in Leo, I don't know about the real man. In Leo's version of this man, was he portraying him where because he did seem sincerely conflicted later on when he's giving her the shots and he takes a drink of what he's giving her and it makes him feel sick. That's when I thought, oh, this is the moment. No, he still does it.
Yeah.
I saw a video with Leo and Lily where they were dissecting a scene, and this is one of the things I saw after our last episode, the one we previously recorded, and they were talking, and they gave me so much insight. Leo gave me so much insight into what he thought of Ernest, and this is me paraphrasing, but he said this is a man who had no business. When they sit down together and they're smoking and they're at the house, it's right before the big storm, and she's like, what do you do? And he says, oh, I'm a man, I'm a businessman. He's like, he has no business, he barely drives a cab,
right?
But he's peacocking for her because he's trying to impress her,
right?
And then something that Lily pointed out that I did not catch is when he asks her, why is somebody like you single? I want to know why a woman like you is single. I'm a man, I want to know why you're single. You notice, and they're showing the clip, she touches her shirt, and she said in that culture, women who have been married before have 2 strips of fabric, and normally you would have like 3 if you were single, and she only had 2. So she touched her shirt to see if he caught on, like, I've been married before,
right?
But he didn't catch on.
Ooh, I didn't. Yeah.
And then they also pointed out that this bookends, it was so cute. Leo said we shared tobacco. I was like, you didn't say just we shared a cigarette? But he says we shared tobacco early on, and then they bookend it later when she confronts him after the testimony. That's the second time that they smoke together, and she questions him. So I was like,
the intentionality. I love the behind the scenes of the filmmaking choices.
It. Yes,
that's so cool.
But they both said, and I think it was in this video that Lily said they had spoken to descendants of these 2 characters who said they did have a connection. They did love each other.
We're going to talk about that. We are absolutely going to come back to that because that's an important point. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I don't know if I've made this clear before, but I loved the book. I came into the film having already read the book twice because I loved it so much. And so as you're saying certain things, it's kind of hitting at me from 2 levels because I'm thinking about it from the movie aspect, but then I'm also, there's some things that I know from the book that are coming to my mind as well. And so it's kind of a little tricky for me because I know
You're waiting to tell
Yes, I'm trying to hold off until the second part. But I do have to cross the line right now because one of the things that did hit me wrong, I will say, in terms of the movie was when we got to the end and we had this very serious drama that had me 100% fully engaged, so historical. And then suddenly we got to the end and it was almost kind of vaudeville-ish where we had this radio show and I was like, what is happening? What?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts on that. So that is something, the ending is also something that stuck out to me and it was very jarring. But because of the intentionality, he had to have done this on purpose.
He did.
I feel like he wanted it to be jarring. And I feel like, first of all, his reading of her obituary was extremely moving.
Yes.
Beautifully moving. And I feel as though he was making a commentary on this is a serious subject that happened. And then sometimes people today take serious things that happen to these people and they turn it into entertainment. So it was a little convicting for me. We try to with this, when we cover true crime tales, what can we learn from this? So we don't just make it like, oh, we're going to talk about murder and all that, like, fun. It's not fun. Murder is not fun, but people use it for entertainment. So I feel like that was his take on that sometimes people tell these stories and it's purely entertainment and it should make us feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think it was a bit of a commentary on how this is such an important story, such a horrific thing that happened, and it was entertainment. And then, of course, as you said, he came in to do that reading of the obituary to show this was something that was incredibly meaningful and powerful, and he wanted to read it because he wanted to put more emphasis on this woman and what she had done. That's why he chose to make that his cameo. We'll come back to that again at the end. But I saw something else in the book. It talks about the fact that this was so sensational that there was a newsreel that came out about these murders that would play in the movie theater at one point. And then I reread the book through doing this research.
So you've read it 3 times now?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It's that good, though. I'm going to tell you, it's that good.
I want to borrow it.
This time I got to the end and it says, quote, in 1932, the Bureau began working with the radio program The Lucky Strike Hour to dramatize its cases. One of the first episodes was based on the murders of the Osage.
That's crazy.
So this was still historical. It had this feel of stepping out of the history.
It was true.
But this was still part of the history. This happened.
Yeah.
And so I do think it was their way of staying true to the history and making that point of, wow, we still, at this point, they were still not giving it the weight that it deserved, the power this deserved.
And I think he made up for it with the power that it deserved by the actual last image, which was modern day Osage doing that dance. That recentered us to let's refocus on who this story is really about, these people.
And then finding out, of course, what happened to everybody afterwards. So that, I thought that was interesting. Well, then let's go ahead and start talking about the cast just briefly, because good heavens, we could spend a lot of time here. But just to touch on this, we've already said that Leonardo DiCaprio played Ernest Burkhart. And the only thing I'll mention here is, other than the fact that he did a fabulous job, right, was that he and Martin Scorsese have worked together on something like 6 feature films now. So
That's
these
wild.
two have a great collaboration, I think.
I feel like I read that it was after This Boy's Life, he was introduced to Leo by De Niro. And then at the time, he had said, I hope we work together for another 12 years. And that this is the 12th year, or that was the 12th year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, Lily Gladstone was phenomenal.
She was amazing. She
playing
was so
Mollie Burkhart.
watchable, and she was so
absolutely.
quiet and still, but then that made, when she would have these big emotional outbursts, it made it even more powerful. You just wanted to see what she was going to do.
She was riveting. I mean,
Definitely.
absolutely. In this quiet, dignified, understated way. We said it before, I'll say it again. I could not have rooted any harder for this woman.
did.
I mean,
And not knowing if I knew it was a true story, and I didn't know if she died.
Right.
So I was, when she was so sick, and a couple times when he would give her the shot and she would just fall back on the bed, I was like, no, please don't let Mollie have died.
Yes.
I really need Mollie to make it to the end, but maybe she didn't, because this is real. And I would not let myself Google it ahead of time to see if she lived or not. I was just fully invested in her making it to the end of this
Yes.
story.
Oh, so
I did
glad
not
she
want them
did.
to win.
well, Lily Gladstone made history by being the first Native American to win the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Motion Picture for her portrayal in this film. It was in the
Fantastic.
category of drama. And she was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress, again, making history.
Fantastic.
Yes, fabulous. Scott Shepherd played Ernest's ruthless brother, Brian. He's Brian in the book. Sometimes you'll see him as Byron, but regardless, he was also a henchman for their uncle.
Yeah, and I saw this as part of the, I
At
think
least
it was
one murder.
I don't know if it was the same interview where they dissected the scene or a different interview with Lily and Leo, but she brings up that point and says no one knows. He was listed as both Brian and Byron, and she said she couldn't remember, but he was listed one way on his grave and another way like on his birth certificate or something. So nobody really knows if he went by both Brian
Right.
and Byron.
Robert De Niro was amazing as the despicable, heinous character, Bill Hale, this powerful cattleman who was running everything, and also the uncle of Ernest, of course. His performance earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor.
I think that was fantastic. And you know, one of the things that was so bothersome about his character is sometimes they will have godly characters be extremely religious, and you're just like over the top religious, and they're the bad guy, and I hate it when that happens. But he was just nice. He was just nice on one side and gentle and sweet and giving the money, and he wasn't over the top. But then out the other side of his mouth, he would give the money and then he would turn around and say, go kill him.
He was the most cold-blooded.
He was so cold-blooded.
He would act like a best friend
Yes.
to some of these people
Yes.
as he is literally setting up their murders.
Yes, he even
Yeah.
called one of the gentlemen, the Osage gentlemen, he said, this is my best friend, and I've got a $25,000 life insurance policy on him, so he needs to live a little bit longer. Like, this is you just said he was your best friend.
Unbelievable. And
He was a
but also
villain.
true.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely 100% true to the story. Later in the movie, we have the FBI enter the picture, and the leader of the group is a former Texas Ranger named Tom White. That's the character. He came in with a little team to investigate the murders. Jesse Plemons is the man who played Tom White.
He was great.
He's amazing. I love that actor. I first found him in Friday Night Lights. I'm not sure if that's the first thing he did or not, but that's where I was introduced to him. I think he's great. Yeah, he did such a good job. 2 other people I'll just mention. There's so many actors that we're not able to touch on just because of time, but John Lithgow and Brendan Fraser were 2 of the attorneys.
I heard his voice first, and I thought, is that John Lithgow? And it was.
Yeah.
John Lithgow, which I read that this was a long time bucket list item of John Lithgow's. He wanted to be in a Martin Scorsese movie, and he's like, I will do whatever it takes.
Put me in it. Well, let's talk briefly about the response to the movie before we go to break.
Okay.
Obviously, we've already said there was a lot of critical acclaim. The movie received these 10 Oscar nominations, but
Didn't win.
did not win a single one.
That's terrible.
Which, yeah.
Did Oppenheimer get all of them? I can't remember.
I can't remember if they got all of them, but Oppenheimer
Swept it
Yeah,
pretty
they
good.
swept it pretty well. There was also a lot of talk about Leo not getting a nomination for his acting.
Yeah,
Which
he
he
should've.
was great.
He was good.
absolutely great. But, that's how things go sometimes. In terms of money, the movie was not a success, primarily because the budget was so huge. It cost around $200 million to make this film.
Unimaginable.
It really is. So even though it brought in around 159 million worldwide, it still wasn't enough to make their money back. However, when you think about how it's
Streaming.
lived on with streaming and all the different things, everyone still considers this obviously a success.
Some of it, though, I'm wondering, and this is not against those people because their paychecks are their paychecks. How much did they pay Leo? How much did De Niro
Well, that's
get paid?
true. Oh, absolutely.
$200 million budget, $20 million, I don't know, could have gone to between those two dudes. I mean, they're
I'm
paid
sure
what they're
they got
paid, so
some good money.
I'm not blaming them. They're Oscar winners. That ups your paycheck.
Yeah.
So,
Well, another positive, an article written in 2024 for the Cherokee Phoenix newspaper shared thoughts from Tracy Lowe, Mollie's great-grandson. And Tracy shared that he was pleased with the movie and how it has helped to spread awareness about this important time in Osage history. And that article also went on to say, quote, "The film was a hit among Indian country, with several local actors, including Cherokee actors, being able to take part in the film. Members of the Osage Nation were first-hand consultants of their own history."
That's cool.
But not everyone from the Osage tribe were huge fans. There was at least one person I saw who shared a different perspective. Somebody from the Osage Nation will come back, and we'll talk about that in the second half.
okay.
All right, so for right now, let's go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the book.
All right. We love including listener voices in our episodes, and we're always looking for more. So tell us, where do you sip your scandal water? Do you catch up on the tea while folding your laundry, sitting at your work desk, working out at the gym? Let us know by sending in your shout out, telling us your first name, your hometown, and where you are or what you're doing when you're listening to Scandal Water. And you just might hear a voice you recognize starting one of our upcoming episodes. Email your audio clip to scandalwaterpodcast@gmail.com. The voice memo app on your phone will work just fine. Cheers!
And we are back and ready to talk about the book. Okay.
Now you're going to get
I
excited.
love the movie. I love the movie.
Yeah.
I absolutely thought it was fantastic. But one of the things that was so intriguing to me was that I had come into that movie having read the book twice, loved it so much that I read it a second time after a couple of years had passed, and had even given it to one of the kids. I think it was Camden and Bree. I said, you guys are going to want to read this. So I expected that this movie was going to be
Like the book.
Yes, exactly. And the approach was so different. Before I just tell you, let me give you a little statistic that'll help you to understand how different it was. In the film, it is around the 53-minute mark that Mollie is taken to see her sister Anna's body that has been discovered. In the book, it is in the second paragraph of chapter 1.
Dang.
Basically, the first page of the book that we hear, Mollie is beginning to fear something has happened to her sister Anna, who disappeared 3 days earlier. By the end of chapter 1, they've, of course, given us exposition and background, but by the end of chapter 1, Anna's body has been found. So the book is very much, in my mind, a true crime
crime
mystery.
story. Yeah.
We went into the film knowing that Ernest and, Bill Hale were
The
bad
culprits.
guys.
Yeah.
We knew that. When you're reading the book,
You don't know?
you have no idea.
Oh, dang.
It is just unfolding before you the way that it actually unfolded in history. And I didn't even see much of Ernest or Bill Hale
I guess
until
I guess in the book, we are in Mollie's mind, right?
It's focused on Mollie's story, but it's really focused on the whole story. But because it follows the murders of Mollie's family, she's at the center of everything. Because if you think about this, it's really the story of her family being wiped out systematically.
Right.
Although it looks as though this person's getting sick. And,
Yeah.
some of it is not clearly murder until you have things like
That add up.
explosions. Right? I
Right.
mean, but yes, it was so very different. And we're going to talk about why it was different and why the approach was different as we go on. But first, let me give you a little bit of background on the book itself. Again, David Grann was the author. This was a bestseller book. It was on the bestseller list for weeks upon weeks. The full title is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI, which one historian clarified this was not the birth of it, but it definitely was in the beginning stages
good
of
title.
the FBI. It is a good
It's a good title.
It's a good title.
It's a good title.
This came out in 2017. Because of the interest it generated and because of its widespread popularity, in 2018, a panel of guests associated with the project was interviewed in front of a live audience. Now, one of those guests was David Grann, the author. One was Margie Burkhart, the granddaughter of Ernest and Mollie.
Yeah.
If you've seen the movie, she was Cowboy's daughter.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And then there was Catherine Redcorn, who is the director, or was, I'm not sure if she's still in this role, but she was the director of the Osage Nation Museum.
Yeah.
You'll hear David mention her briefly in the clip that I'm going to play for you. This is basically David sharing just a little bit of what prompted him to write this book.
When I came out to Osage County, I really, at that point, had no intention of necessarily even writing about this. I really came out to possibly learn more. And I made this trip to the Osage Nation Museum where Catherine and I was meeting for the first time. I think Charles, your brother, had introduced us. And I met Catherine, and I saw that great photograph, which is still on the wall there, and you could see it on the title page of the book. That was taken in 1924, and that showed members of the Osage Nation along with white settlers. It went all across the wall. It looked very innocent, but a portion of the photograph was missing, and I asked Catherine what had happened to that portion. And she kind of looked at me a little funny, who is this person? But she said, that portion had contained a figure who was incredibly frightening. And so I removed it. And she then pointed to that missing panel, and she said the devil was standing right there. And she went down into the basement, and they had this image of the missing panel. And there, peering out very creepily, was William Hale, one of the killers of the Osage and of Margie's ancestors. For me, that was really a kind of a galvanizing moment, because it goes back to your first question, which was, Catherine, obviously, the Osage knew about this history. That's why they had removed the photograph, because it was so painful. And yet, people like me knew nothing, and there was just this missing gap that we had excised and had not learned. And so a lot of the project began almost a journey to address my own ignorance.
So one thing I want to point out is how he talks about he had no idea about it. But think about when that photo was taken, 1924.
Yeah.
It is now 2025. That was only 101 years ago.
It's crazy.
It's so crazy. And just 26 years ago, we were in the 1900s, and we had already forgotten about this. And when he wrote it, it was 2017. So that's even closer to the 1900s still.
Right.
That's wild to me that we have already forgotten about the history of a huge group of our nation.
Well, and so many of us were never taught it.
Never taught it in the first
right.
place.
This is
Yeah,
the
not
reign
even
of terror,
forgotten.
the sensational thing.
Yeah. Well, didn't they say in her obituary that the murders were never mentioned?
It was not.
At Mollie's death. It had already
Not
been
even-
erased.
Not even mentioned.
I can't believe it.
A Smithsonian Magazine article tells a little bit more about this. Quote, determined to confront the injustices experienced by the Osage, Grann embarked on a 5-year research project,
Wow.
diving into the archives and tracking down descendants of both the murderers and their victims. As he interviewed Osage elders, he realized that the number of suspicious deaths in the Osage Nation during the Reign of Terror far exceeded the estimated death toll of 24.
Yes.
Many of these deaths were never properly investigated. Quote, I was really haunted by that photograph because I kept thinking that the Osage had removed enough to forget what had happened. This is Grann talking. But there were so many people, including myself, who had never been taught this history.
Yeah.
We had never learned it.
Yeah. I remember another interview, because this is one of the things that we found after our first recording is a few interviews with him. I remember him talking about seeing a ledger where he was seeing the guardians, and they would have a list of people that were just dead. And
Yes.
he's like, what are the odds that all these guardians have Osage that have died under their guardianship? Like 5, 6, 7, 10 people. That doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
it's unfathomable.
It really is. It really is.
And they were getting away with it.
100%. And everybody knew it. It was just this open thing.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I think the film did bring out, where you would see, for example, I think it was after one of the funerals, the character that Leo plays, Ernest, says, "You're charging me Osage prices.
Yes.
What are you doing?"
Yes.
I mean, like they would just be openly talked about.
Yeah, I think that they didn't call it a whodunit. It was a who didn't do it.
Right.
Because the conspiracy was everyone.
It was, and how could you fight back against that?
Right.
Okay. Well,
We're getting all worked up.
I really am, because Bill Hale was so evil.
Yeah.
He's referred to as the devil.
Yeah.
And removed from this photograph. David Grann said in a Teen Vogue article that he was not going to make Bill Hale the center of his book. Instead, he chose Mollie as the one he wanted to focus on, saying, quote, "At great peril to her own life, she crusaded for justice. I didn't think you could understand these events without her perspective."
I agree.
While we do focus, I feel like in the movie, a lot on Ernest and Bill Hale and Mollie. It's kind of like the relationship that's, developing
Between all three.
Right. When you're reading the book, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, not at all.
That's why I feel like in the book, I haven't read it, but from the way you're describing it, I feel like as the reader, we're kind of with Mollie because we're discovering things along with Mollie, and we have no idea that Ernest, that her husband and the uncle are terrible. I think there's a room for both. I think the book is great the way it is. And then with the film, I like that we see them fall in love. Because it makes it even worse. We see the love.
Yes,
We see how
the
much he
betrayal.
Yeah. And if we just jump into the book where they're already married, it may be hard for us to wrap our heads around, like, Mollie, how did you not see this? In the movie, I see how she didn't see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But no, because it's told from a true crime aspect, a true crime angle, and almost like a mystery unfolding. Yes, Mollie's at the center of it, but really it's kind of this perspective that's a little distant. It's just like, here's what happened, here's what happened, here's what happened. It just walks you through.
Wait. That was in another interview that I heard from him, and he said he did that on purpose. He said he even took out adverbs, he took out adjectives. He said, I just wanted it to read like facts.
Right.
This
wanted
is what
to
happened.
tell the clean, clear
Yes,
history.
yes.
Here's the story of what happened. Yes. Now, in the book, I am going to highly recommend you see the movie if you haven't seen the movie, and read this book if you have not read this book, because I'm going to say, as much as I love the movie,
You like the book better?
I do. I truly do.
Now, let me ask you this. Coming at it, they haven't read or seen. What do you recommend first? Should they watch the movie and then read the book, or should they read the book and then watch the movie?
I think you could go at it either way, because they are so different.
Okay.
You're going to be fascinated either way. But I personally liked reading the book first.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I could sit here and talk for 3 hours on this. I'm so excited about it. But I'm only going to touch on a couple of points that I wanted to bring out about the book. One thing was the fact that, as appalling as it is in the way they portray it in the film, which is pretty accurate, it is way worse to see in the book how these Osage people were treated. They had so little freedom to make their own choices. Yeah. For example, you're reading the book and it talks about the fact that when Mollie was 7 years old, her parents were just told, hey, you don't have any choice. You're going to send your daughter, this little 7-year-old, to a Catholic boarding school for girls that is in Pawhuska, which is 2 days away by wagon train. That's just what you're going to do. Yeah. No choice. There were so many things like that. In fact, David Grann shared that an Indian Affairs commissioner was quoted as saying, quote, "The Indian must conform to the white man's ways, peacefully if they will, forcibly if they must." And about that guardian situation, again, we see it in the film, but the book drives it home even more clearly.
Right.
And David spoke to this point in that same interview. So I'm going to let you hear just a little bit more from David Grann himself.
There were many discoveries along the way that shocked me because I didn't know about this history. Anybody here, and you should do it, it's worth it. You should pull congressional testimony from the 1920s where there was an obsession about scapegoating the Osage for their money. I mean, it was the 1920s, the era of the Great Gatsby. You had people like E.W. Marlin blowing his fortune, making it, blowing it, and yet members of Congress would sit around, often with self-righteousness, saying, what are we going to do with these Osage that can't have all this money? And, you know, you could have an Osage chief who led a great nation, and here you had a local white citizen telling them whether they could buy this car or this toothpaste down at the corner store. And it wasn't just an abstractly racist system. It was as Marvin said, I mean, it was a literally racist system. It was based on the quantum of Osage blood. So if you were a full-blooded Osage, you were deemed quote-unquote incompetent and given one of these guardians. And the system wasn't just racist, it also ushered in one of the largest state and federally sanctioned criminal enterprises as these guardians swindled millions and millions and millions of dollars.
It was absolutely appalling. To pull just a couple more examples from the book to drive this home, these guardians abused their power and stole from their wards, they called them wards, in countless ways. For example, some guardians would have their wards buy products that were priced outrageously high, and it might be from the guardian's own store or the guardian's own business, or maybe they would send the ward to buy something at this certain store because the guardian got a kickback. One guardian bought a car for $250 and then resold it to his ward for $1,250. A guardian might say he was buying land or a house for his ward, but really
For himself.
Sometimes they would just outright steal the money. I mean, it was one thing after another.
It's wild to me, the absolute narcissism of these people who don't have money coming to the people who do have money and just brazenly going, I'm going to tell you how to spend it. You
Absolutely.
go, how did this happen?
It's unreal.
How did this happen? They were the richest community in the world at one time, and these people had the gall to go in and say, well, you can't be responsible.
And
I'm going to tell you how to do this.
This is how society worked for them. This is how the government.
I know.
It was just crazy. But even worse is what we've been talking about this whole time. The fact that they weren't just stealing money through these guardians. There was this whole
network
scheme going on. What I saw, I never saw any examples where it went the other way, although I'm sure it probably existed. But the examples that I saw in the book were men typically who would try to find an Osage woman who had head rights, who was very wealthy, and usually court her and try to get her money through marriage.
I noticed in the film that they called them their blankets.
Yes,
it was that was so demeaning.
So disrespectful. And sometimes they would call the husband a squaw man or something like that, I believe. But most diabolical of all, of course, was Bill Hale, who basically wiped out an entire family in this carefully orchestrated way so as to try to steal everything they had.
And he was wealthy on his own.
He absolutely was.
He was wealthy on his own. You didn't need it. He just wanted it.
Absolutely. Here's an excerpt from the book that talks about how carefully he planned the order of the killing so as to ensure that
he would up with it.
Right, he'd come out with the best possible result. Anna Brown, divorced and without children, had bequeathed nearly all her wealth to her mother, Lizzie. By killing Anna first, the mastermind made sure that her head right would not be divided between multiple heirs. Because Lizzie, that's Mollie's mother, had willed most of her head right to her surviving daughters, Mollie and Rita, she became the next logical target. Then came Rita and her husband, Bill Smith. Tom White realized that the unusual method of the final killing, a bombing, had a vicious logic. The wills of Rita and Bill stipulated that if they died simultaneously, much of Rita's head right would go to her surviving sister Mollie. Here the mastermind had made one miscalculation. Because Bill unexpectedly outlived Rita by a few days, he had inherited much of her wealth, and upon his death, the money went to one of his relatives.
That's just appalling. But secondly, how did he know what was in people's wills?
They were so close to him. Everybody trusted.
Shared.
They would tell him, well, and he would talk to the lawyers. Like, everybody was in on it. You saw it in the movie. The doctors were in on it. Everybody was in on it. I don't think there were any secrets. And this is hinted out in the film, but in the book they come right out and say it. Bill Hale, they think, was having an affair with Anna. When they say that she was pregnant, there's the possibility, the very real possibility, that that was his child, and he had both that child and Anna murdered, if you think about it.
Horrid.
Yeah.
Horrid.
Yeah, absolutely. So to finish that thought, though, the plan, of course, would have been that Mollie would eventually have gotten the money from her entire family. Henry Roan was a cousin.
Yeah. She
would have gotten the money from everybody, ultimately, and then Ernest would have gotten it, and they think probably Bill Hale would have bumped Ernest off.
Oh, I think 100% that was what was getting ready to happen. In the movie, they have De Niro offer, like, well, we just need to sign this little paper here right now just to make sure it just stays in the family. Because, Mollie's not feeling well. And we just to make sure if anything happens to you. And he's like, what do you mean if something happens to me? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Idiot. What do you think is going to happen?
My gosh. Ugh. I was so, like, I couldn't breathe through parts of that film.
I know.
Well, one other difference. Obviously, in the book, the FBI agents play a much more significant role. Just for context, if you think about it, this time period was around the time, this is from your U.S. history class, if you remember that, this is around the time of the Teapot Dome scandals. This is around the time of Elliot Ness's heyday. So if you think about it, there was a lot of widespread corruption going on in a lot of places, a lot of lawlessness.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just in Oklahoma.
Yeah, our girls in Chicago are often their husbands.
Yeah, but this, right? But this place is definitely one of those places where there was terrible, terrible lawlessness. Now, an interesting little statistic I'll throw out. In the film, I don't think the FBI agents come in until maybe 2 hours.
Oh, yeah, it's really late.
Yeah, it is so late. But again, the book is very different. So when these fellas, they were all men, this team of FBI agents come in, the situation is, it's bad. I mean, it is really bad. Not only were members of the Osage Nation being murdered, but so were people who tried to intervene on their behalf. You know, we saw in the movie, there was a man named Barney McBride who had been sent by the tribe to Washington to speak on their behalf. We saw him get murdered.
Yeah.
There were other murders of people who advocated for them. One was an attorney named W.W. Vaughn who was thrown from a train after he spoke to a man who reportedly knew information about the murders, and everybody knew that this fellow was going to tell W.W. Vaughn some of this inside info.
How terrifying to be alive during that time.
Absolutely.
I cannot imagine how scared they all were.
Absolutely.
Because they didn't know where this was coming from. They just knew people were dying left and right.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I feel so sorry for the Osage people. They just know that there's like a target on their back and they don't know what to do about it. They feel powerless and they just keep advocating for themselves, and it seems to be going nowhere. But even these FBI agents, when they come in, one agent said there was, quote, almost universal fear of being bumped off. So Tom White, who was leading the team, he was public. He made it be known. He was the face of it. And there was one other fella who had come in prior to this, talking to some different people about things that had happened. So they already recognized him as well. So Tom and this other fella were the ones who were openly investigating.
Gotcha.
Everybody else,
scary.
Everybody else was undercover. And this went on for a while. They infiltrated different parts of the community so as to try to figure things out.
That reminds me, that is one thing that I had issue with the movie, is I wish they had just had a date flash up on the screen, because to me, not knowing anything about the story, time was collapsing, and I know that there were months or years between some of the deaths, and it all felt like, this all feels like it's happening within the same year, but then they'd have kids, and the kids like, wait, is this her first pregnancy, or what's going on? So I just wish that we'd had a little bit of a timeline to keep up with what's going on.
I think so. And you obviously get that in the book, and you also get so much more detail about the trial.
Sure.
And there's so much more. As crazy as it seems in the movie, it's actually crazier if you read the book. There was so much corruption, and it was really hard for the FBI to make this stick. I mean, there was so much power on the part of these lawless people, and so much of it worked in their favor. And there was jury bribery attempts. There were, so many things that you just almost can't believe it.
One of the things I thought was wild is when they allowed Ernest to talk to, who was that fella? Blackie? Was that his name? The guy?
Yes.
He says, I want to speak to this man privately. So Brian and I are like, oh, well, they're gonna look through the two-way mirror. The two-way mirrors didn't exist yet. They really let him speak privately to this guy.
They really did. It's in the book, but it actually ended up working in the FBI's favor because
they turned on each other?
Right. They were able to use that to convince them to speak. And then they really did that thing where they would bring in one person and show them to the fella who's being interviewed so that it would prompt them to then tell more. That all really happened.
And that one guy was like, get your pencils.
Yes. That was a quote from the book.
So funny.
It was true.
Oh, you think you're going to turn me in? Get your pencils. I got some stuff to tell you.
I had a lot of respect for the FBI agents because
that's scary, because they could have been killed.
Absolutely. And just how hard they had to work and how much time it took to bring down these people who were just heinous. Just their acts were just
completely
awful,
unscrupulous. So they would have killed you as soon as look at you.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, one last thing I want to tell you about the book is a little more detail about what happened to our three main characters.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, not a lot extra on Bill Hale. Here's what I'll say about him. He did become a free man. He was released from prison in 1947.
Wild.
He was forbidden from going back to the Osage Territory, as they said it at the end of the film, although he did visit anyway. People would see him there sometimes. And he did die in a nursing home in Phoenix, Arizona in 1962 at age 87. There was some report of him having waited tables for a while at one of his final jobs, but he lived to a ripe old age.
Well, that is telling me that the age of Robert De Niro in the movie is older than the real character.
Probably, a little off.
Well, I think a lot off. If he's in his 80s and the 60s, he's probably in his 30s or 40s
absolutely.
when this is going on. So the affair with Anna goes from just gross to just wrong. Sorry. I mean, you're thinking about that. Like, what?
Okay, this part was shocking to me. According to an Esquire...
This is what shocked you?
Well, I mean, this was something that they did not hint at in the movie. Okay. According to an Esquire magazine article, Ernest was paroled in 1937.
Yeah, no.
But 3 years later, he teamed up with a woman named Clara May Goad.
Come on, Clara.
To rob the home of Lily Morell Burkhart, his former sister-in-law, so I'm assuming that would have been Brian's wife, maybe, stealing $7,000 in valuables. They were both found guilty of federal burglary charges, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison and had his parole revoked. That was Ernest. But then he was let out on parole again in 1959, and he actually received a full pardon for the Osage murders case.
Who was pardoning this man?
Oklahoma Governor Henry Bellman in 1966.
Step back, Henry Bellman. Take a seat.
I know.
Take a seat. And then doesn't he end up living with his brother? So he robs his brother's wife, and then they end up living together in a trailer
For
or
a time they did, but according to the book, he spent his final days living in a mice-infested trailer just outside Osage County. He died in 1986. He lived a long time.
We were alive at the same time. And I'm sorry, I don't wish ill on anybody, but I was like, Ernest,
I know.
Down with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mollie stood by Ernest for a long time, even after he was arrested.
She just couldn't imagine it.
She could not. A writer quoted her as saying at some point during this time, a reporter, "My husband is a good man, a kind man. He wouldn't have done anything like that, and he wouldn't ever hurt anyone else, and he wouldn't ever hurt me." Now, this plays out differently than it does in the movie. She actually stayed on his side and believed in him until she heard him confess to his role in her family's murders in court, and then she went to all the trials. And so in a couple of the other trials of these other fellas who were involved in the murders, she heard them talking about Ernest and his role in the murders. And once she was hearing this come out in court, she was done. Yeah, she was done with
That's
him.
got to be so hard.
Oh,
because
can you imagine?
Just think about it. The person that you love more, you're married to them. The person you love the most in the world. You've chosen this person. You've created a life with this person. You trust this person.
Yes.
And they're trying to kill you.
Yes. After they've murdered the people you love most.
Yeah, not only just, he's just trying to kill. He did participate in the murder of your entire family, pretty much.
Now, I will say another difference is if you read the book, I think the movie makes it seem as though Ernest was almost always the go-between fella. Sometimes in the book, Bill Hale would set some things up himself. He would be the one to go contact this guy and say, "Hey, can you do this?"
But he also, according to the movie, also made sure that he was never in town when it actually happened.
Oh, he was so slimy. He was so smart about how he would do things. But continuing with Mollie's background, she divorced Ernest and later got remarried to a man named John Cobb.
I was so happy to see that.
Reportedly did have a happy marriage.
I was very happy to see that.
In 1931, it was decided by a court that Mollie was no longer a ward of the state, meaning that she would no longer have to have a guardian to sign off on how she spent her money. I loved this detail that I did not notice until I was rereading the book again this last time. According to the book, Mollie was one of the Osage who kept fighting to end that corrupt practice. Yes, absolutely. You go, girl. But she died at the age of 50 in 1937, and her children did inherit her estate. I will say that's something else the book brought out was the money dwindled over time.
Yeah,
as the oil would go
as
down,
they were
and so much of
them.
as so much of their money was stolen. So when we say that her children inherited her estate, probably it's not the same kind of wealth. That was going on.
And I don't remember if we've pointed out this time. I know we talked about it before, but she did have diabetes.
Absolutely. Yes,
and
absolutely.
So one of the ways that Ernest was trying to kill her is they instructed him to include poison in her insulin shots, which she was one of the first. This is why he was saying, well, Bill Hale is so good. He's gotten you this insulin, which only 5 people in the world are getting this insulin. And she would only allow him to give it to her because she was scared, because she thought, rightly so, that someone was trying to kill her. Wrongly, she did not realize it was her own husband.
Yeah, really quickly, since you've reminded me with that, I don't know if it was as clear in the movie as it is in the book that the mother, Lizzie, her circumstances were
poison.
also more suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to continue with Mollie, we heard Martin Scorsese read her obituary in his cameo in the film. Here it is again. Mrs. Mollie Cobb, 50 years of age, passed away at 11 o'clock Wednesday night at her home. She had been ill for some time. She was a full-blood Osage. And what I saw in one of the sources was this speculation that the reason why Martin Scorsese wanted his cameo to be that, reading her obituary, was because he could not believe that this woman who had suffered the loss of so many loved ones and had fought so hard for justice would have her life reduced to just a
that.
few short sentences like that. He felt like she deserved more,
Yeah.
and so he wanted to pay
Give
her
her
that
more.
tribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bringing this to a close, it was interesting listening to the interview. One of the questions they threw at David Grann, and I know you and I have talked about this off mic. One of the questions they asked him was, do you think it's okay? You know, you're a white man
Yeah.
who writes for the New Yorker. I think I believe David Grann maybe lives in New York. You're coming in. You're the one
An
writing the
outsider.
story. Is that
In
okay?
in all ways, you're an outsider.
Right. Yeah. Should this not have been told by an Osage Nation member? And David gave a lovely response.
Oh, it was precious.
Yeah, I'm not going to play it right now because it was a bit lengthy, but he basically said, I totally respect that. I see what you're saying. He said, I started researching this because I felt like this was something that fascinated me and I felt like I should know more about it. This is a powerful story. He said, I didn't even intend to write anything about it, but I got so caught up in it and got so caught up in, he was speaking to the ancestors. He was speaking to all the people who knew what happened and who had memories of some of the people actively involved in the story. And he just got so caught up in it. He was like, I want to tell this story for them. And I hope that it will inspire other people to tell the story. But then Margie also said something. Why don't you share what she said?
Well, Margie, which is the granddaughter of Mollie, she basically said, when they asked her the same question, are you okay that he wrote this? And she said, well, yeah, it's been 100 years. We had our chance to write it and we didn't. She even says, I personally was too lazy to do it. And she was pleased. She loved the story.
Yeah, because she mentioned that it was taught, like in her history class, this was taught, and she said she remembered a teacher saying, one of you write about this.
Yeah.
Come on, kids, you know, somebody pick
do it.
this up. Yeah. And she was like, none of us did.
None of us did. And it's out there now. So a point I would like to make is it's out there now. And I think even David says, I hope somebody writes another story.
Absolutely.
Go write something else. I would say tell another one of Mollie's sister story. Tell Mollie's story. We have bunches of stories about the same subject. How many stories have we seen about the Titanic? That's one thing that happened. Lots of people experienced it. I would personally love to read more and experience more and watch more films. Give me all you got. I would love to see it.
Absolutely.
Armchair psychologist.
Well, I think that brings us to the armchair. And we've touched on this a couple of times, but now I want to openly discuss this. Why did Martin Scorsese take a different angle with his approach to the film? Well, here's what he has said, and this was actually in an interview that he gave around the time that the film came out. He said that when he was adapting this, he wanted to shift the spotlight away from, quote, all the white guys and make Mollie and Ernest's marriage the driving force of the film. This is, by the way, from a Time magazine article. I found this. He said, quote, what I wanted to capture ultimately was the very nature of the virus or the cancer that creates this sense of a kind of easygoing genocide. When there is betrayal that deep, and we know for a fact that it was that way, there's our story. But more specifically, the film, you said it a couple different times, it shows the relationship between Mollie and Ernest. It shows it as being very loving, even as he's conspiring to murder her and her whole family. And what he said was that it was talking with Margie, who we saw, you and I got to see her in that interview. It was Margie herself who convinced him that their marriage should be the heart of the movie. And here's what Martin said. She said, we have to remember that Ernest loved Mollie and Mollie loved Ernest. It's a love story. So what happened was the script shifted that way and it became gritty. So he intended to be more true to the book. Absolutely. Remember we said he was a co-writer? It was after talking to Margie and some of these other
that he reworked
family members that he was like, okay, I'm going to shift this and I'm going to tell this as a love story and take this angle with it. Now, I told you that I heard from at least one person, an Osage Nation member, who was not so happy with that approach. This is actually an Osage language consultant named Christopher Coate, who was interviewed for a Hollywood Reporter article. And he said that as an Osage himself, he was hoping that Killers of the Flower Moon would be told from the perspective of Mollie and her family. His quote was, "I think it would take an Osage to do that. Martin Scorsese not being Osage, I think he did a great job representing our people. But this history is being told almost from the perspective of Ernest Burkhart. And they kind of give him this conscience, and they kind of depict that there's love. But when somebody conspires to murder your entire family, that's not love. That's beyond abuse."
Yeah. No, he makes a really good point. My counterpoint would be, go write it. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. Please go tell the story that you think it should have been. And again, going back to what we said before, I would love to read it. Tell it, do the research, do it. Let's hear it from your perspective. Second point is, I admire Martin Scorsese for saying, I'm going to change my entire movie based on this point because I think it's a valid point. And I think it was the right move for the film, because we all would have thought, how did you not see this? How did you not see that this is happening? But by seeing them fall in love, seeing this trajectory of their relationship, I just think it gave us more of a heart for understanding her perspective.
I feel similarly to what you just said. I definitely agree with some of the points you made. I guess the one thing that hits me a little differently is loving the book so much.
Yeah.
I would love to see it play out the way the book
Then
unfolds.
let's do one.
So I'm picking up with your first point. Absolutely. I'm like, there's opportunity for another movie. Let's go ahead and make a new one that unfolds in more of the mystery angle, the true crime angle. But I'm so glad, I agree, I'm glad that Martin Scorsese did follow what Mollie's own granddaughter said to be the truth.
Yes.
And I do think that it was powerful to see the relationship. To be honest, in the book, I did not see the love.
Yeah.
I actually saw Ernest being more cold-blooded.
Yeah.
And that may be because of the approach. But how fascinating to see two different angles on this. And boy, was I invested in this psychological drama.
Yeah.
Lily Gladstone called it a great American tragedy.
Yeah.
She said that the movie seemed like the great American tragedy, where I would call the book more of the true crime.
Yeah.
And so fascinating, both of them amazing, and bring on some more.
Yeah. Martin opened the door. He got the story. Well, actually, David opened the door. Martin took up the mantle, got it to the national, bigger consciousness. Now somebody else, take it, run with it.
Yeah.
Give us more. Let their history, don't let their history die out. Just keep telling their story.
Absolutely. And going back to where we started, after the movie came out, all these people now Googling, wanting to know more. So I hope that every time this comes up, I hope that after this podcast, people are reading the book, watching the movie, and doing a lot of Googling on their own.
I want to read the book. You have to let me borrow it.
I absolutely will.
Well, maybe I should buy it. I'll give David his royalties. I would appreciate it if I wrote a book, so I will order the book.
All right. Well, that brings us to the cheers.
Well, as much as Marty and David worked, we got to give it to Mollie. I feel like.
Absolutely.
I've never rooted more. Just that sweet, sweet woman. I wanted the best for her. I was so happy when she had a remarriage and found happiness and got control of her money. I was like, that's the happy ending I wanted for you.
100%. And this woman who had no power was declared incompetent, fighting against society, fighting against the entire corrupt system, and she did not stop.
Yes.
Despite the fact that she'd lost so many of her loved ones and betrayed by her
Got her heart
closest
broken.
Relationship. Mollie, cheers to you.
What a hero. Cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers. If you love what we do, please rate and review our show or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music, Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.